Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, apologies. We've had a slightly late start. We had a few technical difficulties, but I always say it's not a real event unless you've had some technical issues. But thank you for being here with us this afternoon. At NatWest, our purpose is to champion enterprise by helping to remove the barriers that too many face. We have an ambition to remove those barriers and to support more businesses to succeed. And there are a few ways in which we provide support to small businesses, one of these being our Business Builder, which helps businesses with digital and event-based learning. Business Builder also offers a digital community from which you can grow your network and learn from your peers. Our Entrepreneur Accelerator supports and empowers UK entrepreneurs to scale their businesses to the next level through one-to-one coaching, access to events and thought leadership content, a network of like-minded peers, and access to experts within your field. Also, our Digital Business Hub provides content relevant for your business in the form of articles, videos, and toolkits, which provide intelligent and practical solutions to everyday business challenges. So if you have a business need and want to know more about ways we may be able to support them, please do feel free to get in touch. I want to thank you again for joining today's In Conversation With session. As part of these sessions, you'll hear the inspiring journeys of relatable entrepreneurs, learn what motivates them, as well as the hows and whys of building their business dreams while they share their learnings with you. Before I introduce today's exciting guest, just a bit of housekeeping. Please feel free to use the comment functions to connect with each other by sharing who you are, where you're from, and your business. I have lots of questions for today's guests, but I will also ask your questions, so please do post them in the comment session as we go. And I'm now extremely excited to welcome Dr. Joanna Abeyie MBE. Joanna has blazed a trail as a multi-award-winning social impact entrepreneur, champion of diversity, inclusion and equality, as well as making a mark as an award-winning journalist and broadcaster. Joanna spent the last 14 years increasing the employment of diverse talent through inclusive hiring practices and creating inclusive working cultures. She launched her first charity, Elevation Networks Charitable Trust, at 18 and went on to start her own social enterprise, Shine Media, in 2008, where she placed over 3,000 people from diverse backgrounds into work within the creative industries. Her latest enterprise is Blue Moon, a flagship inclusive executive search business and diversity and inclusion consultancy practice. And her work, coupled with her personal story, led to her delivering a TEDx talk in Oman in 2018 on social mobility. In 2019, the University of Reading awarded Joanna a Distinguished Graduate Award, and in the same year, she received an honorary doctorate in business from the University of West of England, which is also my alma mater, just for a bit of extra information. Joanna was also awarded her Freedom of the City in 2018 and became the first Black female to become a livery woman for the Worshipful Company of Haberdashers, and was also awarded an MBE in the 2020 New Year's Honours List for her services to diversity and inclusion in creative and media services. Joanna, I am so thankful that you're able to join us today, and also I am not worthy with all of the accomplishments and achievements. But first of all, I'd like to start.
You are more than worthy. So thank you very much for the kind introduction.
Well, I'd like to start off with, how are you today?
I'm good. I was a bit nervous because of the technical issues, but apart from that, I'm really good. We're getting nicer weather, aren't we? The sun's out today. That always helps in terms of like energy and
definitely. It always makes all the difference.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling good. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. And just so pleased you're here. So thank you for joining me today. So I'm going to crack on with the questions, but I can see we've got already got a few comments from our guests who are really excited to hear from you. So my first question, I like to take my guests back to, I guess, the beginning, but you launched your first charity, Elevation Networks, at 18 years old. One, what was the catalyst for you setting that up? And two, I guess at that age, because I think when I was 18, I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. What kind of motivated you to want to start a charity, especially at such a young age?
Well, I can't take all the glory for Elevation Networks. It was actually originally founded by a friend of mine, Samuel Kasumu. And he then joined up with, he was by himself to begin with, and he sort of was writing poems about elevating your future and things like that. And I was a journalist at the time, so I was interviewing Sam, and then Sam kind of met a number of us really that were quite like-minded individuals. So actually it was 7 of us all together. It was myself, Sam's now wife Barbara, Arnold, Kate Lily, Cynthia, Francesca. Hope that's everyone. Did I count 7? Arnold, I said. Did I say Arnold?
You did say Arnold, yes.
So I haven't forgotten anyone. Kate Lily, yeah. So it was 7 of us to begin with. And I guess why we'd all come together in a way was that we'd all been really interested in social impact and increasing representation in our multiple sectors. So I was at the time doing work experience in journalism, and I was doing a degree in English and sociology, but I'd very much done quite a bit of work experience by that point. So I was really interested in improving kind of representation within in the journalism sector. Then Barbara, for example, was really interested in law and financial services. We had others that were really interested in IT, and so what we essentially did was create elevation networks, which had the slogan "Know Who, Know How," and essentially there were networking events that we held with places like IBM, Nabarro Law Firm, the BBC, Barclays Capital, Morgan Stanley, and essentially there were events really just to introduce those businesses to, at that time, graduates that were from underrepresented backgrounds, so essentially from universities that weren't the top 20. And the reason we started with graduates is because we were at a time, actually, this was back in 2005, 6, where organisations were looking at entry-level careers, but with a focus really on graduates. So thankfully we've moved on since then. But what we saw, even within looking at the demographic of graduates, was that there were those that went to universities like the Oxbridge universities, the Imperials, the Warwicks, the LSEs, who businesses sort of gravitated to when it came to Careers Week and careers fairs. But then there were all these other universities which would have had super talented people that actually, for lots of cultural or social economic reasons, maybe didn't go to those universities, but we're going to come out with really great grades. So what we were disappointed by was, if you like, the lack of access for people that were not maybe at some of these most prestigious universities. So we could see that even in trying to be open and have access for early careers, they were still quite limiting in terms of what universities they were targeting, so the demographic and the diversity of those universities. So essentially that's kind of how it started, and what Elevation Network started. As it's since evolved and still a charitable trust, which is run by Samuel and Barbara, and they've gone on to continue to do some brilliant stuff. But probably after about 2 years of being there, I then moved on to set up Shine Media, as you mentioned. But yeah, so the reason why we really started that was just acknowledging that there was this total lack of representation, and what we felt a level playing field when it came to introducing new talent, entry-level talent, to the market for the labour market for.
And can you tell us more about Shine Media, and I guess what that was focused on, and why you decided to go sort of the social enterprise route?
Yeah, so Shine Media, really, while I was with Elevation Networks, I was doing a degree. I was about to do a master's in journalism. By this point, I've had my work published in about 30 odd magazines, newspapers. I was working in the radio on the weekend. I was editing a kind of local community magazine on a Sunday. So there was so much activity within the creative industries for me personally, specifically around sort of broadcast and print journalism. And then, as you can imagine, I started doing my work experience at 16. And so I experienced my own inequities, things like not being able to afford lunch, because they didn't pay for lunch at that time. They didn't kind of offer expenses, not being able to physically get there because I didn't have the money for a bus fare or a travel card, things like that were a barrier. So I'd end up walking to things, I'd end up going without lunch, all of those sorts of things, really. Then realizing that when you get into that space, you feel like a bit of an alien. If you come from a council estate like I did in Southwest London, and you suddenly join this really glamorous editorial team with people who speak differently, majority of them, on the one magazine that first when I did work experience on, there was one ethnic minority. So as you can imagine, it doesn't feel sort of representative at all of the school, of your community, of where you live or anything like that. So you're also, how I described and certainly felt at that time, was from a really low socioeconomic background. So financially you feel inadequate also, which is becoming really evident, isn't it, for the fact that you can't eat lunch and things like that. So it wasn't just about like when it came to leveling the playing field, it wasn't just about access to those opportunities. It was actually about how you felt like you belonged in those places once you actually got there. And so that was just my own lived experience. So we spent a lot of time with Elevation Networks focusing on that across, as I say, the different sectors. But where I was really growing increasingly concerned was within the journalism and broadcasting sector, television production, mainly because I felt like there were really powerful platforms in which we read newspapers, we see the power of that today, and we've seen it in matters of the royal family. You know, we've really seen how powerful the stories in which we consume through the media are. A really powerful narrative. That's the first part I noticed. Then I thought about the fact that advertising campaigns also influenced what we bought and what we engaged with. And then I thought about television programs and how they represented us. And actually, if you were sitting in a particular place and you had no experience or lived experience or engagement with someone, for example, who is a wheelchair user, the only representation you see is what is being given to you through the screen or what you're hearing about through adverts. So then I kind of thought there's a much bigger responsibility here, actually, that if we are going to be such a visible force in our output, that we need to really accurately represent those people. So I started off kind of thinking about low socioeconomic background because that's what I felt was my barrier. But very quickly you realize there's so much intersectionality with that. So, you know, you're more likely to be from a low socioeconomic background, for example, if you are from an ethnic minority, if you do have a disability, you're more likely to be unemployed, for example. So there are all these other things that actually in looking at class, I couldn't avoid. And I didn't feel like there was a hierarchy of inequality. So as I was hearing about it, I was as impacted by the experience of my blind peer as I was by my experience as a young mixed race Black woman from a working class or low income home. So, and then you start to realize that there's not bigger, but other things that are impacting on that leadership. And so I just felt that with university, the master's starting, I was working part-time in secret because you weren't allowed to have a job when I was doing the master's.
Oh, wow.
That had been funded for me for a bursary and then met with a bank loan. So I was trying to balance quite a lot. So I actually felt that what I knew was that space. So let's start with what I know. And so that's why I decided to set up Shine Media. And the whole idea of it really was I believed that there was talent everywhere. All they needed was a bit of polishing, which is why I called them a little bit of shining, bringing back the shine. So, you know, like I was young, so forgive me for the lack of creativity.
I quite like it though. It's simple and effective. Should be simple to communicate with.
It's so funny because when I joined S3 and we rebranded Shine Media actually to Hayden, the CEO said, when you say shine, I just think of teeth whitening. So I said, can you forgive me? I was like 20 years old.
I don't think that's a bad image though, because then when you're supporting people, it helps them to smile. So you should be thinking about smiles. I think it links.
Yeah. So I just realised actually I just felt this responsibility to remove the barriers that I had, and which is what essentially Shine Media was. So I worked with the Journalism Diversity Fund to give funds to people from diverse backgrounds to do the studying that seemed to be the only route in if you were kind of doing these sort of really explicit and advanced explicitly journalism, like an explicit journalism course at say like City or Cardiff or LCC. That seemed to be the only route in. So I wanted to make sure that I then diversified who was in those pools, of which lots of newspapers and mags were going to at that time to recruit. So we had that. Then I wanted to remove the fee from those training courses. So I created my own one using the curriculum that my master's had. And then because I'd done so much work experience, asking all the people that give me work experience with all those years of experience on them to volunteer and run the training. So then I ran a training program, which we actually eventually placed 75 people into work off the back of in places like Channel 4 and ITV. And the BBC, and that was essentially us and the Guardian, and that was us basically getting the curriculum that I had, going to the accreditation body, which at the time was the PTC, using the City University curriculum, which was like the top school in London at that time for journalists. Then using my salary from, so basically with the BBC, I got the bursary for them to pay for my school, my fees, but then they gave me a job for 6 months. So I used that money of 6 months' earnings to pay down on a studio at the Camden Roundhouse. And then I've used that as the classroom. And then I went out through charities and organisations and recruited people through places I felt were not getting a sort of a look in.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, as I said, I started to create training programs of that nature, which gave them exactly the same level of training, but without this £9,000 fee, which I saw as a barrier. So that was the next thing. And then I thought about mentoring, and actually, once you get in, how do you stay in?
Mm-hmm.
And who's kind of preparing people for that environment that they walk into? So then I created a mentoring program where I asked the companies that accredited all these courses, who agreed that this was the standard at which the industry needed someone. I asked for them to then mentor anyone that had done a course, who'd gone to the lengths to find a bursary. I thought it was quite important that they were mentored, because you've gone and found the bursary and then you don't get a job. It's, it seems silly that there's this investment and we don't contain the talent. So then it went into mentoring. Well, I say into, these are all happening sort of simultaneous at the same time. And then it very quickly moved into sort of recruitment, but not with any formal recruitment training. What I was doing was asking businesses to afford some of our talent the opportunity to sit in front of them and show what skills they had. So I created assessment centres, roundtable discussions, things like that, which I would create for people to come along to and promote. And then to as many people as possible, invite everybody along. And then what essentially I'd do at that stage is then say, like, you met them, what do you think? And then I'd start sort of badgering them to give them opportunities. And then before I knew it, that lots of one company hears about you, like Pearson hears about you, and then they go and tell ITN, and then ITN hear about you and they go and tell the Beeb. So it was kind of, it just was word of mouth, and it was spreading really, really fast. Oh, just to note, I didn't charge for any of this, so it spread even faster. Can you imagine all these companies wanting talent, and they've got this young, optimistic, slightly naive young lady that's like a full-time journalist, but really, really passionate, about seeing more of her and people from her backgrounds and those that are underrepresented working. So I was just doing everything I could, really. So it started as a passion project, and that's kind of by accident. It was a social enterprise. I didn't really know about money and how to charge, and I thought it was bad to charge for something that was supposed to be a social cause, that was to make change. I thought, why should you financially benefit if you did it? I thought you're doing it because you care, so I just felt very odd about that.
We hear that a lot, especially from female business owners.
It's an interesting one, and because I was working as a journalist, I continued to work as a journalist for 10 years while I had Shine. I just thought, well, it's not as if I'm starving, like I'm able to look after myself a little bit. I mean, I was putting a lot of money into Shine Media, but I was able to look after myself. So I just, that's it, kind of spiraled. And then in 2016, I kind of came into contact with S3, and that's when things changed slightly.
Okay, and you may have already answered this with your talk about specifically around the charging, but in those early days, what do you think some of the hardest lessons were that you had to learn? And if you could go back and do it again, what pieces of advice would you give to yourself as a younger person starting out, but also to others who are starting their journeys now?
Yeah, I would say that's a really, really good question. So I think for the work I do, as a equity, diversity and inclusion consultant, and also looking at the executive search piece, my advice would be that 14 years of conversations with businesses and employees about their experiences within the workplace, about the challenges that they're facing around inequity, both as an employer and as an employee. You are a human being at the end of the day, right? So although you're able to provide expert solutions that change the environments, literally transform cultures, give diverse talent an incredible opportunity that they absolutely deserve, and then they go on to make your business thrive, that is without a doubt one of the most fulfilling and incredible feelings to have, right? But you're also a human being that is hearing a lot of pain from a lot of people, whether that is internally from employers who are trying their best to get things right, or if it's employees that feel their age, their marital status, their sexual orientation, their disability is actually being used as an inequity, is making things not fair, is not leveling the playing field. That's a hard thing to hear day in, day out, which I have for 14 years. So my advice to that 18-year-old who thinks she's going to have that level of energy and is somewhere there needs to be an outlet. I'm saying for people with social causes where you are campaigning for something really important to you, which it was to me. It didn't start because I thought I could make money from it. It started because it didn't feel right. So it's automatically coming from a internal place, right, which is hard. Okay, so my advice to that little girl, she was a baby, really, 18, is to say to her, you have to have another outlet to talk about all of the heaviness that you carry from every conversation, whether that is a question that is potentially racist that people don't realize is, to a question that is totally discriminatory to someone with a disability who also you care for. You need an outlet. So I would say to anybody who is doing anything with that is purposeful driven, that is hasn't started off as I know I can make money from this, or is just this doesn't feel right to me, just make sure that there is always somewhere that you are able to have a healthy conversation about that, that's not with those you're trying to support. My other piece of advice would be you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. And the reason I say that is I had no idea that I would be sitting here today having an interview with you, with a doctor before my name, with an MBE after my name, with a good income. No idea. This is a girl that was sometimes walking to the office that I was given because Camden had a scheme that was trying to use derelict buildings for social enterprises, right? Like that I would volunteer for 6 years in this space. When you're doing that and no one's really, you might be getting the likes of the attention of ITN and they're taking your candidates and they're placing them or wherever it may be, but you're not being paid anything that you can live on, right? So you have no idea that this is going to grow. So as I say, just take the first step with a little bit of faith that you're doing the right thing because you're doing it for the right reasons. And if it's meant to be, the staircase starts to come. And I'm not saying you ever get to the top of the staircase because I'm not there yet. I'm just on a couple of those steps, right? So that would be one of my tips, that is just take that first step sometimes. You don't need others. And I don't mean that in a team, right? Teams are important. You do need a team. What I mean is you don't need the approval of others or the co-sign of others to get on with something. Now, one of the mistakes I made early on in my career was to believe that if a brand, a huge, big brand, thought that Shine Media was great, and it must be great because the BBC want to work with me, right? Or because Bloomberg are interested in running this program with me. So we must be good. No, you should know you're good. Do you see what I mean? On your own, you should know your value. You should know your worth, with or without their cosign. So what I mean, so when I say that, please be clear. You absolutely need a team. You don't have to be the star of every show. You don't need to be in charge of every element of your business. But what you do need to believe in is that on your own, your organization is worthwhile and valuable. And never do this thing of like, maybe never is a strong word, but I would have said never, so I'll be honest, right? Is I used to think that they were doing me a favor. Organizations were doing me a favor by working with me because I get to say I work with this big brand. No. I'm finding exceptional talent to work in your business so your business grows and thrives. I'm doing you a service, right? I'm giving you the service. And in fact, on top of that, most organizations aren't doing this, right? Especially at that time. Well, there were other things, but let's say 8 times out of 10, most agencies were just recruitment agencies. They weren't thinking about EDI at all. They were just thinking about, it was a numbers game, right? It was a sales game. So also, not only am I finding you the best talent, but I'm finding you talent that other people aren't necessarily making the effort to do. So it's also being aware of the fact that this isn't just a service, it's quite premium.
Yes.
Right? I'm going above and beyond here because apparently you can't find them anywhere, right? So sometimes so don't give that away for free, because according to them, the talent's so hard to find, which you all of a sudden found, pretty easily just by having a look, and and you're giving them something that they need. So just be really humility is obviously important, but at that time I was probably a bit too humble. Like, do you know what I mean? I went on for years not realizing that actually no one's going to work with you if you haven't got anything that they need, if they're not benefiting. So it's a really hard, busy time. So if people are working with you or interested in hearing from you, it's because you have something that is of value or a service exchange that they want. So don't sell yourself short. Whatever, know the difference between a good pound and a bad pound. Piece of advice that I was given by Raj from Green Park. And the difference between a good pound and a bad pound, that just because it's money coming in and you're a small business doesn't mean you run at it, because it might not actually work out to be in the best interest of your organization, the journey which you're going on, and where you're trying to get to.
So making sure that you're like connecting your values with the people you're working with as well.
With that commercial element, like, it's really important. And don't say, well, at least it's some money, so I'll get 2/3 less than I would usually because it's some money. Don't know the value of what it is. Know the difference between a good pound and a bad pound, if you like.
No, I like that saying. I'll use that in the future.
You probably forget that.
Over the last few years, as you'll be well aware, there has been obviously an increased focus on the importance of equality, diversity and inclusion and representation. So when you were growing up, and or equally when you were starting out in your business, were there any people that inspired you or that you kind of drew inspiration from?
Yeah, I think first of all, just looking at the comments, they're making me laugh. There were first, so I think people like Joanna Abeyie, who was brilliant at seeing me in the studio at BBC Radio London and going, "What's your name? Come and tell me what you think of the show. What did you think of the show?" And it welcoming me. I was like, yeah, what I think, like, this is Joanna Abeyie, who's got this show on the radio. Like, I'm like 18. Don't know. I mean, why does he care? But they were all talking, and he said, and I was just this little work experience. Like, what did you like? What did you think was good? So he reminded me that no one's opinion is insignificant. Everyone's opinion is significant. So from that day, he's just one of the nicest human beings I've ever known. And then as time went on, there were other great allies like Priscilla Bafor, who's now gone over to TikTok, who would say, come and use the Channel 4 studios. Absolutely do that here, just behind you, just with you, just standing there with you. Really important. Miranda Wayland, people like that I've really started on that creative journey with. And then people like Karen Blackett. She was the first person to say to me, it's not bad, doesn't make you a bad person if you charge for what you do. So it actually means that if you charge for this, right, you can get more people to do what you do. You can have a bigger impact because there's more people you can hire into your organization or train in your organization that can go off and do more. And that was honestly as if a 10-ton load just got taken off my shoulders. This approval, this permission, which is a shame that I needed it, but it was important because it changed the focus actually. And then I would say Gary Eldon, just backing you. I mean, at every stage, in any room, just backing you. When I'm not in the room, still backing me. I think so. Those things are important. Gary, CEO of S3, super duper successful, has built up a number of brands, sees me at a powerless dinner, has a chat with me, gives me his card, says come and see me. You email him, this is the CEO of a 4,000 staff organization, 33 territories, barely in the country at any one time. Of course I remember you, come and see me. you know, and then the first moment I went into his office, this is, you know, you can imagine how busy CEO is, right? He could say, what are your terms and conditions? Straight away, should be doing that, shouldn't be doing that, do more of this, do more of that. Didn't need to do that at all. Like, this is just a young girl he's met at this thing and says, come, I'll tell. It doesn't benefit from telling me that stuff, but I don't do anything, you know. So as I say, it's like people like the Dottons, the Garys, the Mirandas, the Melanie Eusebies, you know, that are campaigning for there being an award within the creative industries, within the Black British Business Awards, and, you know, and introducing that, and just those people that like just put their hand up for you all the time, and even to the point of, I hope there's not going to be a crash bang behind me, but and then even to the point of just last night, you know, having a wobble, and then being able to ring people like Michelle Moore and say, I'm having a wobble. She's a coach, quickly come round, we'll sit in the garden, have a cup of tea, we're going to talk through this. So there's been so many, it takes a village. I really believe that. And then my family, like, were at the heart of all of that. Every one of them had their own unique challenges, I think, of which I've been really open about in my TED Talk and stuff. So it was it's they've always inspired me also, like, to do it for everyone, not just for kind of my needs, if you like.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's great to hear that there are so many people who are so supportive, and, as you said, that give their time freely, even though they don't necessarily need to. I think this whole concept of paying it forward and being an ally and sponsoring people is, like, if we all did that, how much better of a place would the world be?
Absolutely. And it doesn't take a lot, you know. And I mean, I do it. I still do it. I do it as much as I possibly. Well, I do it a lot. I was going to say as much as I possibly can. I do it a lot. And I'm not saying that, and I've got no problem doing it a lot. But I was just about to play myself down and do what we do. But I do it a lot, and because it's important to me. And I think if you can do it, you should do it. No, even when you think you're only one step ahead, you're still one step ahead. So tell them you learned that one step ahead, so that, you know, you don't have to have been at the top before you give some advice to the person coming up.
That's really great advice. Thank you. So you've made, obviously, a really successful career advocating and driving inclusive recruitment and building these inclusive business practices and advocating for change in your industry. Could you share with us what maybe the events of last year relating to, obviously, the tragic death of George Floyd, and knowing that there was a increased focus on racial inequality globally, but here in the UK, what did that mean for you personally, but also for Blue Moon and the work you do? And sorry, there's another question on top of that. Almost a year on, what positive changes have you seen, but also what further changes do you think that businesses need to implement?
Really, really good question. So once we sort of started Hayden, which came after Shine Media and was a part of S3, we very quickly moved from the creative industries into big, broader industries. So that was everything from financial services to IT and technology to civil engineering, education sector. So it's much wider now. So when I answer this question, I'm not just talking about the creative industries. So essentially, last year was tough. It was hard. It was emotionally draining. But I felt that if this is the moment that people will now step forward, Joanna, just get that armor on and push through this, because as much as it was damaging and difficult for everybody else, it's also damaging and difficult for an EDI consultant expert. You know, they're still a human being living these experiences like everybody else. So first of all, it was quite difficult. So I don't want to pretend that this was something that was so great for business. It was hard in that respect, but businesses came, you know, in abundance asking for help. So that's a positive, because in my 14 years, as much as we've had, you know, a good run, this was the most proactive I felt businesses had been in trying to get things right. Now, I think the message that also landed, hopefully, or certainly from what I've experienced with my clients, is that this isn't going to be a moment thing. They have to do something. So they've done things to help ensure that they're held accountable and that these topic doesn't fall by the wayside, which was creating external advisory groups to make sure that those strategies and plans that they made stayed strategies and plans that they were going to make, and it was going to be measured. And I've seen that at every level. I've seen CEOs say, ask me, I want focus groups. I want to know what every single person in this organization feels, irrespective of, any background or any difference. I want to know everything, and I want to start from there. So, and I've always, that's been our route anyway. That's been our starting point. So when I had CEOs say, I want to do what you said, I want to start from that starting point. Finally, we've got somewhere. Finally, that's brilliant. So I feel like in the short answer to that is we saw more proactivity, we saw more activity. We saw people wanting to learn anti-racism, allyship, understand microaggressions, not understand them so that they could be better at having microaggressions and without being caught, but trying to understand them so they weren't there in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. However, it's been a year, and while I still feel that businesses have continued the energy, their energy has stayed there, their enthusiasm has stayed there, I get nervous sometimes that the moment you stop making a noise, things go quiet again, and there's another trend, there's another thing that people feel they want to be passionate about. So what I would say, and this is to what I call the sort of independent activists that use their social media platforms to share these things, don't start sharing and then stop. You have to keep sharing the things you're experiencing and your lived reality, whether that is somebody who is transgender or if that is somebody who is Jewish and has experienced anti-Semitism. You have to keep sharing that, because the only way that businesses remain accountable is if they're constantly being told that they exist. So don't go on the sort of moment thing. And I know there's burdens that you carry, and I know it's tough and all of that, so I'm not suggesting do anything to infringe on your own mental health, but I think if you're happy to keep talking about it in some way, don't let that momentum go at any stage, because these businesses and organizations need to be accountable for the way that they have systems in place that do not challenge inequity. We need to take all of those structures and systems that allow inequity to stay in its place. And so the way we do that is we don't stay silent. Find a way to share it. If it's an anonymous blog, if it's whatever, you need to share it in some way so that they're always aware. No one can say no, basically. And what I would say to businesses is you need to think of this. We know the commercial reasons why diversity matters. It's been in reports for years and years. It's been in reports before my 14 years. If you think about, Lord Woolley, I'm sure he has seen it in reports and reports and reports, right? We've got the reports, we've seen them. We know the commercial reasons for why diversity makes sense. We also know there's an immoral thing around that. But what I think you just need to remember is that any of the experiences that somebody shares with you, there is nothing making you a superhuman that you would not experience those things at some stage in your life. You're not immune to some of those things happening, right? Whether that is acquiring a disability, meeting and settling or marrying somebody of a different faith or ethnicity, for example, having children who become gay or transgender. No one is above those things, right? So this idea of sort of privilege and elitism, like no one is above that. So I think it's really important that as organizations you think, how would I want the world to be if that was my experience? I don't wait till it becomes your experience. Like it could become your experience at any point, right? So this is just about humanity, essentially. Like, why shouldn't there be an equal opportunity for everybody? And we hire in our likeness. We know all of that. So challenge it. Challenge it in that moment. We know it. I refuse to accept that organizations don't know stuff anymore. I know it. Like there's information overload. Like you only have to go on your Twitter to see how much information overload there is, right? So I just think that just remember, yes, we know the commercial reason. That hasn't been compelling enough because we would have seen more change, right? So that's obviously not got you. Fine. Then we've seen the death of George Floyd. Unfortunately, that's not a unique incident. Like, that's not the first. The difference was this year, everyone was forced to sit at home and do a bit of thinking, right? And somehow, although there was much inequity with COVID, we were all leveled in one moment because this pandemic was going to get, and this virus was going to get anyone, right? It wasn't choosing who it was getting. So suddenly we're all sat at home having to listen more, have more empathy, understand well-being and things like that. So that's what I mean. You never know, right, when one of these elements of inclusion will impact you. And suddenly, even this year, lots of people that would go, oh, cheer up, it's not that bad, to their friend that's dealing with anxiety or depression, suddenly has understood what anxiety and depression can feel like because they found themselves in a global pandemic. Who would have ever guessed that that was going to happen? So just try and be a bit more human when you think about, you know, equity and diversity and inclusion. How would you want the world to be if these were your experiences? And when you say, you know, I don't know what it's like, that's a privilege. It's a privilege that you don't know that, right? So use that to try and think, well, what could I do then to give them the same privilege of experiencing something like this in a fair way? So my kind of thing and my message to companies is action now, right? How do you make this an environment that you would want to be in should you have those experiences, to the person of your left or the person of your right? And that's the thing, like we know all the other stuff. We don't need to keep telling you that. Just ask yourself that question. How do I make this an environment where I can get the best people to come here and work for me in the environment which gets the best out of them? How do I do that? And that should be the only thing that people are thinking about and continuing to do around the anniversary of George Floyd and beyond, like every day. That should be the question. And it's not the CEO and HR, it's absolutely everybody in your organization should be asking themselves that question.
Thank you. That's an incredible answer, and really interesting to hear your thoughts. You mentioned obviously the pandemic, and my next question is about how has the pandemic, and I guess specifically the different lockdowns, they've had a major impact on us all, as you said, mentally, emotionally, physically, but how it's had a very clear impact on a lot of businesses. And it's great that obviously this week businesses are able to open again or start to open again. But how has it specifically impacted your business? And what would you say have been maybe some of the worst things or the best things about the past year and the lockdowns for you?
I think from a business perspective, what's been difficult has been like when we had the first lockdown in the March, businesses just panicked. And what I found really difficult while they were trying to navigate and understand how to get their business through this, when we had no idea that when the end was coming or anything like that, was the job losses. That was heartbreaking. It was also difficult because obviously with the role I have lots of friends in HR, and they're human beings that are having to other human beings in the middle of a global pandemic. Unfortunately, we can't keep you in your job. They were emotionally hard things. So I think as a consultant and someone that's sort of alongside a lot of people trying to help and support them in giving everyone their equity, that was a difficult thing to witness when you could see how troubled those individuals were. And I think you think, oh, they're HR, they're used to it. I don't think they are used to that, actually. I think that's a really hard thing to do. I thought that was difficult. Obviously, then businesses like mine did take a little bit of a pause because anything EDI had to stop because they were just trying to work out how to survive, first of all. And as you can imagine, unfortunately, EDI is still seen as a nice to have as opposed to a business imperative. So that was interesting in itself. But what it did is it allowed me a bit of space to think. And actually, it was Gary that said to me, you always have to be thinking how your business can thrive in any environment, in any working situation. So all it really did was get me doing things online. So all I thought about was I looked at all the services that we currently run and just thought, how do I make sure that I can do that online and ensure it's accessible for individuals that may have particular needs? How do I do that? And that's what I did. I adapted, and I think that's the most important thing. And what I was really pleased of for people that work in the creative industries, that are kind of in events or in theatre, and I say this with my creative diversity APPG hat on here, that what was really important was there being lots of places for independent freelancers to speak, having updates so they knew where they stood on their income, and that sort of transparency. So what I would say is that And what I've learned this time around is how important it is to kind of create a bit of a tribe and for people to be compassionate of the experiences that other people are going through, because so many people had a really tough year. And a friend of mine runs an events business and hasn't been able to do an event in the way that they would weddings and things like that they would do. So with having to be quite creative about how to create these platforms online for events and weddings and things, when no one's going to get married online. Do you know what I mean? There's like lots of different things like that you had to suddenly think about. So I guess the biggest lesson for us all is how do we prepare for anything, in a way? Never know what the anything is. Okay, so I think it's just about always being knowing or having the skill set in you to be adaptable and flexible, and to move with the times in a way.
Yeah, thank you. And I didn't read out all of this earlier because you're involved with a large number of organisations, just so our audience have an idea. So you were instrumental in establishing the Creative Diversity All-Party Parliamentary Group. You sit on the UKRI Arts and Humanities Research Council and the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport Council, advisory panel, and a whole host of other. I know you're a non-executive director for Investors in People, and you're an advisory board member for the RISE group, which is for women in broadcast. So why is it important to you to commit your time to be involved with the organisations you support? And can you tell us about how some of those opportunities came about for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is why I always say you don't need anything other than your kind of yourself, your truth, when it comes to kind of getting the things that are meant to come into your life. So the reason that any of those opportunities have come up is I've just been honest about my experiences. I haven't, honestly, that's it. I've just kind of worn my heart on my sleeve. There's not a question people will ask me that I wouldn't tell you the truth about, whether that's from my anxiety and depression to the financial troubles that I've had in my business. Like I just try to be as open and as realistic about this journey as possible. What I don't want to do is pretend that it is in any stretch of the imagination easy. It's not easy, but it is incredibly rewarding, right? So I think that has helped me a lot. So for example, I was invited to join the Lord Mayor's Appeal as a trustee because they asked me to speak at their Power of Inclusion series on social mobility. And I told the truth. I told the truth about the fact that in my house, sometimes we would boil the kettle because there wasn't any hot water, because we didn't have any gas for the electric. This is what some young people are living with, guys. This is the reality. There are people going to food banks. That is the reality. Maybe when we're in the city and we're very privileged to wear nice clothes and go and have pet lunches and all the rest of it, some people just do not have that. So I told that truth. That being a big pillar of theirs, and they asked me if I would join as a trustee. So that's what I mean. But when you get into these places, be you and be honest about your experiences, because the chances are people haven't heard it. Because most of people that are from marginalised groups think that there's something wrong with their background, and so we either avoid talking about what it is, or we think we have to fit into what they're like because that's what success looks like. So we have to actually no, just go in there and be yourself. And largely, that's usually a room that's like, oh, difference, something new, great, like we can hear a different opinion. So that's how that sort of came around. I was asked to join the counter-terrorism expert advisory panel for New Scotland Yard because I spoke at the stock exchange about the work I do with Blue Moon. And one of the members of New Scotland Yard were in the audience. They asked me to come and talk at their kind of back to work sort of day, and I told the truth about what I've experienced as a mixed race Black woman running a business, what I've seen other people experience, the inequities I see my gay friends experience, the inequities my Muslim friends experience. I just told them what I've heard, what I've seen, and anecdotally what I find through businesses. So I guess I think so. And then when they set up an advisory board, they said, we would love you to join. So what I would say is in terms of how you get involved in those things is just tell your truth. And it sounds really cheesy, but that's the secret to how I did it there, which is not the secret, right? I didn't necessarily go looking for it. When I was asked a question, I told the truth, irrespective of whether my voice was shaking. And by that, I mean, even if I was nervous, I told the truth. And even if I thought this really exposes me, and these aren't my friends, but I'm telling them about really hard times. But I did that because I thought, actually, there's so many people who have these experiences who won't get to be in this room. I'm in the room, tell them, like, just be the voice for that person, because if the powers that be can hear, they can make the change. If they never get access to those experiences, how they'll only know what they know. So that's how those sorts of things came around. And why is it important? Since I was a little girl, I don't know why, my mum says it since I was a little girl, and my friend left me a voice note the other day and said, "You've always been like this." I just don't I don't like people feeling bad. I don't. But it bothers me so much, like, so it bothers me so much. So if I, when I think about the culture committee, which is led by Tracy Braben MP, when you hear all the great work that she's doing, and how much she's been so tirelessly campaigning for a level playing field for people, and then she gives you the floor to talk about how, what's your experiences, you tell me so I can go off and do more. I'm absolutely going to do that. When you go to investors in people again, I spoke at something and the chair asked me to join them, and all I did then was explain how you could be making your working environment more open and inclusive. So I literally only choose things that I care about, because I heavily invest a lot of time. Another thing, don't believe the fibs that boards will tell you. It's 4 meetings a year. Never is a year. It's not. They ring you all the time. You get emailed all the time. There's always an event. So it has to be something that you love, because they will take a lot of your time, right? And you don't want to sit on something that you don't want to give your time to. So I don't say that as a complaint. I'm telling you to manage your own expectations. It's really, really important that you are aware that you join things that matter. So everything I do, all those boards, they're all about EDI. So I haven't gone off into too many different things that require too many hats. The counterterrorism is actually about how we create, positive relationships with the public to make sure that when we are under threat and things like that, we're not alienating particular groups culturally, but actually we're representing the reality and the truth of some of these situations so we can keep everybody safe. So that's what it is. It's about being really honest about what your values are, and so saying yes to things that you can actually contribute to.
No, amazing, thank you. And you were awarded the Freedom of the City in 2018 and became the first Black female livery woman for the Worshipful Company of Haberdashers, and were also awarded your MBE last year in the New Year's Honours List for services to diversity and inclusion in the creative and media industries. I'm telling you this like you don't know, but this is for our audience.
Even hearing it back, I'm like, who is that?
But what does it mean to you to be recognised for the work that you've done?
It's nice, but you don't do it for that. Does that make sense? So it's nice and it's flattering, but yeah. And I guess like even with the MBE, I rang my dad, I rang my brother. I was like, what shall I do? They're the kind of people that I go to when it comes to just, there is the debate around empire and things like that, and the work I do. And I was wondering if these were at odds and how do I navigate through that. So you it's not as if you just go, yeah, that's great, that sounds fun. Do you know what I mean? Some of this requires conversation and internal debate and stuff. So when you get them, it's really flattering, it's really nice. And then I always think in accepting these things, can I make a change? And ultimately you can, right? So like with the work we do at the Haberdashers, we then go into the schools. I've become a governor of the schools. I'm quite a outspoken governor on those schools.
The schools love having you.
No, I think they think I'm all right, to be fair. But like there's like I'm outspoken, so like it's helped me to help, if that makes sense. So if it's going to continue that, then I'm happy to do it. But as you can imagine, right, and there's a theme that's coming through, it's like when you want to help so much and you have all this empathy, you have to look after yourselves. So I'm just saying that because you asked a really good question at the beginning, Shania, about the fact that we've got an enterprise and it went into a social enterprise, there'll be so many people, I'm sure, in the community, the community that you have within NatWest, that are starting businesses from places of real passion, places of real importance, right? With very little support sometimes, and relying on platforms like this. So that's why I say, like, whenever you're doing that, just please look after yourself, because your business cannot be at the expense of your health and your peace of mind, right? So and yeah.
So I was going to say that links actually really nicely into my next question, which was, I ask most of my guests this, but I have to say more so than any other guest I've ever had, you seem to be involved with a lot and do a lot, but it sounds as though it's something you've always been quite getting involved in a lot and doing things alongside while you were studying, and then obviously the business it is. How do you manage those demands on your time, and what is it that you do to unplug, if you do ever unplug?
I do unplug. I do. Like, people don't think I unplug. I unplug. Okay. I read novels. Love a good crime novel. If you know me, I'm either listening to a crime podcast, I'm listening to a gangster on YouTube talk about their time in prison. Don't ask me why. I'm absolutely obsessed with, like, understanding the, like, behaviors and things like that. I'm horse riding. I love horse riding. I run, I train, I like cooking. Everyone knows me. I don't look it, but I eat like a horse. so I shop far too much than I should.
And the shops are open now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it hasn't stopped me, Shania. Online shopping has been my friend. It's like, I do find those things, and like my friends, I'm really lucky. My friends have kids that are hilarious and incredible, like girls and boys, and so I get to spend a lot of time with them. So I do unplug, but in the week, it's quite full on, I'll be honest. But I'm lucky with the boards. I always know the dates in advance. Like, they kind of give me the dates for the year. So largely I can meet all of them. I mean, the only time usually that I would have to sort of move anything with meetings, like for board meetings, is if I go on holiday. It's very rarely, because I've actually got a work clash. And that's how I manage it. And I say to myself, like now, 8 a.m. on the screen until sort of 6, and then stop. And I do that Monday to Friday. But then in the evening I cook, I train, and I usually speak to a counsellor just to offload some stuff, because as I say, what I do is really heavy. So I'm being honest about that, because it's not as if I float through these conversations. I have to unpack some stuff too. And then on the weekend, I might pick up some stuff that needs some doing, some reading ahead of other stuff. But I make sure I go for a walk, I leave the house, I wash my hair. I know it sounds silly, but there's something, isn't there? I'm sure, Shani, there's something about washing your hair and like blow drying it. And do you know what I mean? It just makes you feel a bit like, oh, it's just a normal.
Makes you feel fancy.
Yeah, like, do you know what I mean? So I try to include things like that. And when it gets tough, I admit it's tough. When I need to unplug, I say I need to unplug.
No, thank you so much, Joanna. You have been an incredible guest. Some of the things that have come through for me is your passion about what you do, but also that, like, just living in your truth and being really honest, as it sounds as though being able to be that honest and sharing with people is your secret, as you said, but not a secret to success. I know our guests have really enjoyed this, and one has asked if they're able to connect with you. Is it possible for anyone to reach out? What's the best way? LinkedIn, Twitter?
You can do LinkedIn, Twitter. On LinkedIn, it's just Joanna Abeyie. It might be Joanna Abeyie MBE on LinkedIn. On Instagram and Twitter and every other platform you can think of, it's just Joanna_Abeyie. And if you wanted to email me, you can just do joanna@joannaabeyie.com. So it's joanna@myfirstname.lastname.com.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm sure my audience are joining me in giving you a massive virtual round of applause. Thank you for being such a wonderful guest. And also thank you to everyone for joining today. We will be back soon, so we'll get in touch with our next session. And until then, stay safe and stay blessed.
Thank you, Shania. Thank you so much for thinking of me, for doing this, for providing a platform for so many people. You're absolutely a breath of fresh air for so many. So on behalf of everybody else, I want to say thank you to you for even thinking I would have anything to offer and say. So thank you, honestly.
So much. Thank you.